Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our fifth webinar in our Webinar Wednesday series. This month, we're celebrating Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're going to be diving into a topic that is so important but so often misunderstood. My name is Marissa Frieder, and I'm a program coordinator for the Work Well NYC program. And before I introduce Jen Magnitz, who's our speaker today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Work Well NYC, who we are, and what we do for those of you who are new. So Work Well NYC is the city's worksite wellness program, and we're here to help you live well and work well. Our goal is to create work sites that make it easier for our employees, that's you, to live healthy and active lifestyles. We know that health is more than just not being sick. It's your physical environment, it's your mental wellness, financial, emotions, environment, and we know that health exists on a spectrum. And so we want to be here for you with health and well-being resources, programs, and support no matter where you are on your health journey. We have a range of programs from diabetes prevention classes to Weight Watchers, fitness, among many others, and we encourage you to visit our website to learn more. One thing we also know is that managing stress and staying mentally well is absolutely essential for living a healthy lifestyle. We also know there's a lot of misinformation out there about mental health and mental illness, and so we're so excited to bring you today's webinar. With that, I'd like to introduce Jen Magnitz. Jen is a licensed mental health counselor with the New York City Employee Assistance Program, the EAP. She is passionate about spreading mental health awareness to city employees and their families. And with that, take it away, Jen.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I want to dive right in and ask you, what do you think of when you hear the word mental illness? Do certain words come up like psycho, crazy? What about those people are not like me? Well, my name is Jen, and today I'm going to talk about and hopefully dispel some of the myths that we might have about mental health conditions. And our first myth comes to you by ways of a question. How many people do you think are really affected by mental health conditions? 1 in 5? 1 in 10? How about 1 in 50 or 1 in 100? The answer is 1 in 5. So that kind of takes care of our first myth that mental health conditions are rare, right? The fact is that 1 in 5 Americans are affected by mental health conditions each year. And I want you to think about that for a second. This means that you definitely know someone in your personal life and or work life that lives with a mental health condition. You may live with one yourself. But before we go any further, let's discuss what exactly qualifies as a mental health condition. According to NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, a mental illness is a condition that affects a person's thinking, feeling, or mood. These conditions can affect someone's ability to relate to other people and function in their day-to-day life. I mean, since this is pretty broad, let's talk about some of the more common mental health conditions and what we think we may know about them. This brings us to our next myth. Anxiety isn't a real illness. The fact is, anxiety is very much a real and treatable mental health condition. In fact, it is the most common mental health condition. NAMI estimates that 40 million adults, which equals 18% of the US population, live with some kind of anxiety disorder. Anxiety is an emotion characterized by feelings of tension, worried thoughts, and even physical changes like increased blood pressure, for example, or headaches, or a racing heart. And it isn't always a bad thing, right? I mean, it can motivate us to study for a test or prepare for a webinar. However, when an intense fear becomes overwhelming and prevents you from doing the things you need to do, it warrants some further exploration. Before we get to our next myth, I want to present another question to you. The World Health Organization predicts that heart disease will be the most common cause of disability worldwide by 2020. What do they predict as the second common cause of disability? Is it diabetes, cancer, depression, or HIV/AIDS? The answer is shockingly depression. Our next myth is about depression. Our next myth is that people who say they are depressed can just snap out of it with positive thinking. The fact is, depression is much more than feeling sad or down or in a funk. According to the National Institute for Mental Health, 16 million or 6.9% of American adults live with major depression. It's very common, and it's a mental health condition that can cause feelings of sadness, but it can manifest in a lot of other ways as well that aren't as well known. Depression affects our sleep and our appetite. Some people eat more, some people can't eat. It affects our concentration and causes a loss of energy. A lot of times people lose interest in activities that they once enjoyed and can be plagued by hopelessness or guilty thoughts. It can even cause changes in movement, like less activity or agitation, and even physical aches and pains. It can also cause suicidal thoughts. Look, everyone experiences periods of sadness, but when the sadness becomes overwhelming, or you notice any of the symptoms above, you should reach out for help. And while it can be triggered by a crisis, the truth is that there doesn't need to be a single cause for depression. Causes can be situational, and they can also be biological. Our next myth is that people with more serious mental health conditions, like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, cannot hold down jobs and are prone to violence. The fact is, people with mental health conditions are just as productive as other employees if they are addressing their illness. They have jobs, they're competent parents, and are active in their communities. In fact, when employees receive effective treatment, it can increase a company or organization's productivity, lower absenteeism, and lower total medical costs. Think about it. Someone with untreated anxiety or depression may have difficulty being productive. So it is in an organization's best interest to spread awareness about mental health and its treatment to its employees. The second fact has to do with the same myth. It addresses the other part of it. Having a mental health condition actually does not make a person more likely to be more violent or dangerous. According to NAMI, people with these conditions are more likely to be victims of violence rather than commit violent acts themselves. This is largely in part due to the stigma around mental health conditions, which we will talk more about in a bit. Our next myth states that people addicted to substances like drugs or alcohol can stop using whenever they want to. The fact is that the National Institute on Drug Abuse defines addiction as an enduring condition that triggers the user to compulsively search out and use substances. Now that's a mouthful, so what does that mean? It means that the nature of the disease, the nature of addiction, is that people will continue to use regardless of the consequences, which is why saying something like, it's me or the alcohol, doesn't usually work. Some substances also cause physical or biological dependence, which means a person's body ends up needing the substance just for them to feel normal. This doesn't mean that an addicted person can't stop or can't get help. It just means that addiction isn't as simple as stopping when a person wants to. But why do we have all of these myths about mental health? And why do people tend to not speak freely about it? One word: stigma. There is a lot of stigma around mental health, and it's hurting us. What do I mean? Many people with mental illnesses are blamed for their condition. You're not depressed, for example, you're just lazy. Or they're called names. She's so moody, she's psycho, she's bipolar. Imagine being blamed for a cancer diagnosis. Ridiculous, right? I'd like to show you a quick video that highlights some of the issues that come up around the stigma of mental health conditions.
I am a mother,
A father, son,
daughter,
brother,
a sister. I am a student,
a stay-at-home mom.
construction worker,
volunteer,
I am loving,
smart,
funny,
generous,
way too generous.
I am all of the amazing things you see.
But there's something you can't see.
or don't see.
Something that I don't let anybody see. Like when I'm alone.
In a room full of people.
You can't get out of bed.
And maybe I've gained weight.
Or lost weight.
Why do men always lose weight?
It can get dark in here.
really dark.
Addicted to food,
The web,
Work,
sex,
alcohol.
Something to take the pain away.
to feel happy.
To feel something.
Anything. Nothing.
Because depression isn't a mood.
It's not a passing thing.
Or a bad day.
It's a disease. I can't just get over it. It feels like I'm underwater.
Drowning.
And sometimes I think you'd be better off without me.
I am telling you this. All of this.
Because I need help.
and you are my wife.
My dad,
My husband.
my kids.
My boss.
So please, don't judge me.
Leave me.
Fire me.
Please be patient.
Don't give up on me.
Just be there for as long as it takes.
Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it isn't real.
For a lot of reasons. Even though it only highlights one mental health condition, depression, it shows you that every gender, race, age, and ethnic background struggle with mental health conditions. It also highlights stigma. The characters express fear of being judged, left by their family, or even fired. This is why people don't want to talk about their mental health. Stigma has a huge impact on our society as a whole, and it is a double-edged sword because people who live with mental health conditions often face internal and external stigma. Internal stigma refers to a person who lives with a mental health condition's own sense of shame, a person's own thoughts of, I should be better, I should be stronger. It's when you absorb the external stigma yourself. And the external stigma, I feel like, is a little bit easier to understand. That's the stigma from peers, from family and society. Media is a huge source of external stigma. Violence is automatically attributed to a mentally ill person without putting the person or their situation in any kind of context. Movies perpetuate myths. They lump every mental health condition together and tend to make people struggling with mental health issues look a certain way, like disheveled, jobless. In the movies, how often is the villain mentally ill? The media doesn't report about the person struggling with depression that gets out of bed, showers, and goes to work every day. Stigma causes a lot of problems. A lack of understanding by peers and family. It can cause difficulties in finding work, housing, and participating in social activities. And in some cases, health insurance doesn't cover certain kinds of mental health conditions. Stigma causes bullying and harassment. And it affects a person's own belief that they will never be normal or okay, which causes people to isolate and be reluctant to get help. Stigma causes people to not get the help they need. So how do we fight it? We do what we're doing now. We talk openly about it. We educate ourselves and educate others about mental health. A huge step we can take is to be more conscious of our language, to eliminate words like crazy, lunatic, psycho, wacko. Instead of saying, oh, she's bipolar, say she has bipolar disorder. We can show empathy and concern for someone struggling with a mental health condition, and we can push back against the way people who live with mental health conditions are portrayed in the media. We can encourage equality in how people perceive physical illness and mental illness. Remember when I talked about getting blamed for the cancer diagnosis and how ridiculous that was? We can push back against blaming people for their own mental health conditions. And lastly, we can advocate for mental health reform. Here's your last myth for today. People can't really recover from a mental health condition. The fact is that today there are so many ways to treat mental health conditions successfully. A lot of people still think of mental health conditions as something that causes people to be locked away, or that seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist will permanently label them as unfit. This is an example of what we were talking about. It's an example of stigma. While some people may need to temporarily go to the hospital to get stabilized, that is not the automatic method of treatment, or even a common one. There are many different kinds of treatment options. There's individual therapy, which can include psychotherapy, or something like CBT, which targets your negative thoughts and how to fight back against them. There's family therapy, group therapy. There's medication for some cases. There's inpatient treatment and outpatient treatment. And some of the most supportive counseling comes from family, friends, faith-based leaders, and self-help meetings, like 12-step. You might be wondering where you can reach out for help. New York City employees and their families can reach out to the New York City EAP. The EAP, which stands for Employee Assistance Program, provides education, information, supportive counseling, individualized assessments, and referrals for appropriate care. We also do workplace programming. New York City employees and their families are eligible for this free and confidential service. And I just want to stress that yes, your families are eligible for this too. To make it even easier to access us, city employees can use city time to come to EAP. In addition to the EAP, here are some other helpful numbers and contact information. NYC Well is a great resource for New Yorkers to find mental health support via text, phone, or even online chat. And I've also included the behavioral health numbers for both GHI and HIP, which I know are the most common insurances held by city workers. But if you don't have Emblem Health, you can visit the health benefits webpage to find contact information for your plan. Lastly, the WorkWell NYC website has great mental health and stress management resources.
All right, thank you so much, Jen, for all of that wonderful information. We have time to take a few questions before we wrap up, so please type your questions into the chat box in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We're so glad you joined us today, and we hope that you'll be willing to share your feedback so we can continue to share content that is useful to you. So we ask, please copy paste the survey link on your screen into your browser. There's just a few short questions. The link is case sensitive, and so if you have trouble with it, we'll also be sending out a follow-up email with the recording and the survey link. And so a bunch of questions are coming in for Jen. First, what if my kid needs help? What should I do?
Well, I was trying to stress that, you know, I think a lot of New York City employees know that they can come to the EAP, but I think that a lot of people don't know that their families are eligible too. So technically what that means is that your dependents are eligible, but the truth is that we're not going to turn you away. So if you have a family member that's struggling, I would definitely recommend giving us a call. It's stressful enough to be dealing with that. So being able to reach a live counselor who can talk you through the process of, you know, different ways you can approach the situation can be super helpful at a time like that.
Thank you. And what about, what do you do, excuse me, if you suspect a coworker might be having some mental health concerns? You know, if you notice someone hasn't been themselves or they seem a little down, how would you navigate that scenario?
I think that's a really good question, because I think that we tend to not treat things at work the way we might necessarily treat them in our personal lives. But my director, Kevin, likes to say, you know, if you saw somebody at work having a heart attack, you wouldn't just pretend that it's not happening. You would help. And, you know, we have to start looking at mental health the way we look at physical health. And if you notice behavioral changes, or if you notice that somebody's not right, you know, you approach them, you offer to listen, and better yet, I think I mentioned New York City Thrive. The Department of Health has a great initiative through Thrive called Mental Health First Aid, and it's a free course that teaches you how to do just that. It teaches you how to notice behavioral changes in your community and your work family and your home family, and goes through the delicate process of how to approach that with someone. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. It's absolutely free. But you know, if someone is talking to you, the best thing also that you can do is to listen and to be human, and, you know, sit with someone while they're going through something difficult. I hope I answered that. I think I was a little all over the place.
No, I think it sounds like great advice. We're getting a couple of questions from people who are expressing frustration with family members or close friends who have mental illness and need help but refuse to get it. What kind of a recommendation do you have for the person who is frustrated that the person they love isn't getting the help they need?
I think that's really hard. I just want to say that that's probably one of the hardest things, is to see a child or a spouse or a partner or, you know, a family member going through something, offering the help, and them not wanting it, or being too afraid to, you know, accept it, or just not willing to even see it yet. And I think that what you can do in those kind of situations is set up appropriate boundaries for yourself, which, what I'll explain what that means is, I think that absolutely offer the help, absolutely offer the information, but take care of yourself too. And you know, you're not going to be of any help to someone when you're sort of drowning with them. So like I said, absolutely offer the help, absolutely offer the ear, the empathy, but at a certain point, you also have to take care of your own mental health. And again, it's one of those times, I feel like I keep saying call the EAP, but call the EAP, you know, because that's a really hard thing to deal with, and we can help you through that.
Great. What about a couple of questions coming in about exercise? Does exercise help prevent mental illness? Does it help you maintain your mental health? You know, there's a lot out there in the media, but
Absolutely.
Let's go straight to the source.
I mean, I'm not a scientist, but, you know, I think I just want to address one part of that question first, because I think you said, you know, does it prevent mental illness? And I don't know that there is anything out there that prevents it. You know, it kind of goes back to the blaming situation, like, oh, if this person only exercised, then they wouldn't suffer from depression or something like that. And I want to be careful around that, because that's not true. You know, of course, we encourage taking care of your mental health. That's why we're doing this webinar today. But things can creep up no matter what. You can be sleeping right and eating right and have support and still go through anxiety or still go through depression. Exercise is a great coping skill. It definitely, again, going back, I'm not a scientist, but it creates, you know, those feel-good hormones in your brain, dopamine. So I would definitely encourage it. And it's a great thing to do, anger down, to just, you know, sort of get it out. So yay, exercise, but as far as preventing, I don't know about that.
That's great, yeah. And we have time for one last question. So is mental illness inherited, is the question.
There are studies that show that certain types of mental illness runs in families. But it's not as concrete as, oh, so if your father had schizophrenia, then you're going to have it too. They do see more prevalence with certain diseases like addiction, like schizophrenia, that if you have it in your family, you may be, I don't know the exact numbers, I'd have to look them up, but you might be X amount more likely to experience it, but it's not a guarantee. And having no one in your family that struggled with a mental illness, which is probably very unlikely, but having no one doesn't mean that you won't either.
It's like everything else.
Exactly.
Physical and mental health related. It's
Exactly.
complicated.
It's
There's
complicated.
no simple, clear answer with health sometimes. But thank you so much, Jen, for being
Thank
here.
you.
This was wonderful, and we hope you will all tune in for our next webinar in 2 weeks on the importance of sleep and how it affects your body and your mind. So thank you so much. Have a great day.